Hi, everyone. I see we already have a small cadre of individuals here. Just to introduce myself, I am a customer success manager here at Quorum. My name is Zeke Smith. I realize people are coming in from other sessions or may need to grab a cup of coffee, something like that. So we're just going to give about 1 or 2 minutes for people to find their way to this or our other Wonk Week content, and then we'll get started in 120 seconds, we'll say.
Sounds great.
All right. I think now is as good of a time as any to get started. I know we still have a few people trickling in, but of course this will be recorded and distributed. So if you're arriving just a minute late, don't worry. We're not taking attendance. Just to do a bit of housekeeping before we get started, wanted to introduce myself and our guests here momentarily. I am Zeke Smith. I'm a customer success manager here at Quorum. And today we're going to be talking about high impact video in public affairs. Just to reiterate, I know I mentioned it offhand briefly, but this session will be recorded and the recording and the slides are going to be distributed after the event. Second, I'll mention that on the right-hand side of your screen, there's going to be a chat box and a Q&A submission form. Please use the chat throughout the session. We love it when folks share insights or submit questions to Q&A as you think of them. We'll make sure to leave a few minutes at the very end of the presentation for questions and answers. If you want to pepper Emma and Max, their thoughts on how your organization might be able to utilize video in your storytelling efforts. So with all of that having been said, we're ready to go ahead and dive into our content today. So I'm really excited to be joined here today by Max and Emma. Just as a brief biographical introduction, Max Kringen is a strategist, idea guy, educator, and proud member of the Bald Brotherhood, I can see. His background is in digital marketing, content strategy, social media strategy, and execution in healthcare, emerging media, and education. Starting his first web design company while in 8th grade at Enderlin, North Dakota, Max started Tellwell back in 2014 to tell the stories of our community. Welcome, Max.
Thanks. Excited to be here.
And our second guest today is Emma Solomon, who is a government relations director for Western Governors University, where she advocates for states to diversify their higher education options. She spent over a decade working in state legislatures focusing on education policy, and outside of WGU, Emma serves on the boards of nonprofits that advance global connectedness and free market economies. Thanks so much for attending, Emma.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So let's go ahead and dive into it. I feel like in my role in customer success in Quorum, I work with a lot of clients who have a desire to use video in their advocacy or grassroots efforts. Would love to just start out by asking the both of you, what do you think the best role for video is in public affairs or your advocacy process? You know, how should it best be used?
Well, I'll start out talking about this. I think so at Tellwell, we have developed kind of a cool funnel, and this is what we call an engagement funnel. And if I just kind of skip ahead to that, we really think about using video as kind of mimicking the conversations that happen in a coffee shop. So I'm from a small town in North Dakota, and I feel like a lot of people can relate to this, where if you wanted to figure out like who should be mowing the lawn, who should be pushing the snow, who should be doing some of those things, oftentimes you're going to go to you're going to go to your local coffee shop and you're going to chat with your friends. So what we try to do is within video, we really try to mimic those offline conversations, but have them online, right? And so as we think about that engagement funnel, there are really 4 parts to it. The first is introduce. As we introduce a topic, really what we're trying to do is just get people used to hearing your name and understanding a little bit of who you are. As we jump into the next phase, that's really educate. Educate is where we try to get people to a little bit more understand your DNA. And so as we talk about video, and as we talk about video today, the 2 key parts to where we think video fits best, especially in the WGU ecosystem, is in this introduce and educate phases. Engage, we kind of leave to the handshakes and the boots on the ground and those types of things. But then the final one, and this one is super, super important and one that most people forget about, is this idea of remind. And so remind is reminding people that you love them, reminding people that they love you. And that might feel a little like corny, but you've worked really hard to develop a relationship. And so if you are consistently like reminding people that like they chose your brand, they chose the goods and services that you're offering, and reminding them that you still respect them as a client, really, really good things happen.
That's really helpful. And a lot of people in public affairs love a process. So having put that all in kind of a 4-step piece is really helpful. Emma, anything else to add there?
Not particularly. I think storytelling is really one of the best uses for video. And I love this system that Tellwell has developed. I think that once you determine where you are within that funnel with your particular audience, that's a great jumping off point.
Zeke, if it would be helpful, we could kind of show an example of what that introduce phase looks like, specifically in video, that kind of starts to talk through the case study too.
Sure. Yeah, would love that. What better way to, show the impact of video than actually showing the video itself?
So I, like a traditional creative, I may not have been a part of all of the different setup things that we were supposed to. So I'm actually going to reshare my screen as a different Chrome tab, so that way people can hear the audio as well. But that way you can see what this piece looks like. So just let me know when you can see this guy, and then I'll press play. Good to go?
Greetings, Newsom. I wanted to take a moment today to personally congratulate you on your re-election in the great state of California. I certainly look forward to continuing our collaboration. WGU is an online nonprofit university committed to making high-quality, low-cost education accessible to all. I know that education is a high priority for your state. We want to help you meet your education and workforce goals by joining in a private partnership with WGU. By recognizing WVU as a professor pathway to earning a degree, you can allow greetings, Governor Newsom. I wanted to take
That wasn't working exactly how we wanted it to, but I know Zeke has promised that we will make sure that all these videos are available right after this presentation as well. So,
yeah, trust us, it's more impactful when you're, not viewing it through the lens of our presentation. But maybe you can just sort of summarize for people who heard the audio coming in and out what that campaign was sort of built around, and kind of what it was aimed at accomplishing.
yeah. Solomon, I'll kick this off, and then if you want to kind of jump in from there, that would be great. So what we were really trying to do is Western Governors University is the best kept secret that most people haven't heard of. And Western Governors is really an incredible institution that in a time of like online universities not always holding up a great beacon of hope, Western Governors is really incredible. And so one of the things that we wanted to do was, as new governors were coming in, we wanted to make sure that they had at least heard of Western Governors. And so based on where they were in that funnel, whether they've never heard of Western Governors before, whether or not they just needed a little bit of extra information on it, whether it was time to ask for legislation or whether it was just a reminder to let them know. What we wanted to do is we just wanted to say congratulations to each of those governors. We wanted to do it in a way that hopefully they weren't expecting. And so it wasn't a phone call, it wasn't an email, it wasn't some of those other things, but we created these really cool kind of like custom boxes. And I'm not sure if this is gonna pop up, but basically we say open the doors to opportunities, but first open the box, right? And part of the goal with this campaign was to do a little bit of a surprise and delight. So each one of these mailers individually actually was customized with their name, a little bit about WGU. But the coolest thing about this is once they opened up that video, it automatically played their customized video from the president of the university. So our goal was really to, one, introduce, or two, solidify our place in the hearts of those governors. And so that's where the idea of the campaign came from. And Solomon, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about what some of the results were, but it's been pretty incredible.
It has been. And as a former lobbyist, I know that you spend a lot of time just trying to get people to care about your message, to understand who your organization is. And so if you can control the narrative, if you can create this type of surprise and delight moment, as Max called it, and present them with something very polished where you're controlling the storyline, that's a great way to introduce someone to your organization and your message. So for this campaign, we were really looking to engage with newly elected and re-elected governors across the country. So because we have different relationships with different governors in different states, we really needed to tailor those specifically for them. And so we looked at where did they fall within the funnel that Max reviewed at the beginning of the session. And based on where they were in that funnel, we tailored that message to them. After the videos went out, we had really great engagement. Governors reaching out to us saying how surprised they were to receive the video. And that really led to more conversations with our lobbying team, because that's really where a lot of the magic happens, is once those relationships are formed. But these introduce, educate pieces are so essential to helping support that type of relationship.
No, that's fantastic. And I think, when particularly a group of people are expecting one thing, get something else, there's that element of surprise that's pulls in that video can really provide, right? So maybe they're just expecting a standard mailer in that package, open it up, and suddenly there's a customized message for them. So fantastic idea. Now, Max and Emma, either of you can speak to this. I'm sure a lot of people watching are kind of thinking like, okay, I don't know if we can pull off exactly the same sort of project, but maybe they're thinking more broadly about how to incorporate video into some of their public affairs work. I'm curious if you can maybe give a summary from your perspective of what are like the central ingredients of a high impact video. It may not be a direct message to their governor, but what are some of the pieces that you think need to be there to really help their work level up?
Yeah, I can kick this off. I think to start with, one thing that I think, especially people who are so dedicated and so focused on the work that they do, think that everybody is going to be just as interested in what they think is really interesting as anybody else. So the first thing that we talk about is really focusing on an engaging storyline. So what we do to try to help organizations find that engaging storyline is we actually use a framework called the hero's journey. The hero's journey is a storytelling framework kind of as old as time itself. Aristotle kind of made it popular. It was popularized by like Joseph Campbell in the 60s, 70s, 80s.
Yeah, if you ever have any aspiring screenwriters out there in the chat, they may be familiar.
Absolutely. And then even more recently has been popularized by Donald Miller in the story brand framework. And so what we try to do with that hero's journey is we really try to make, in this case, the politician, the policymaker, the policy influencer, the hero of their story. And then we try to position ourselves, in this case, WGU, as the helpful guide that helps them get to that heroic ending. You know, Solomon and I are working on probably about a dozen different storylines right now where there are individuals that really showcase how those individual legislators can be heroes for their own states by supporting legislation for adult learners. And that's really, really fun to see. So I would say, one, engaging storyline. We do that through the hero's journey. Two is a really strong call to action, a clear, compelling call to action, like that guides folks who are viewing your video to the next steps to engage with your organization. I think one of the things, especially being a good Midwesterner, is we don't like to ask people what we want them to do next. And so it's incredibly important to have a really strong call to action. And the final thing, thinking about diversifying your delivery methods. How many videos have you seen that like go up on a YouTube page and just die there? Our goal always is to take a video and deliver it 5 to 10 to 15 different ways, right? Think about your email list, individual emails, an email signature, delivering in a physical mailer, showing at every single one of your events. A video, it doesn't matter how impactful it is if it's not being seen by the people that you need it to see. So making sure that it's getting delivered in all those places too.
Yeah, that's great. So the framework, you know, the central ingredients there being the storyline, the call to action, the delivery. I wanted to hone in just a minute on the call to action piece because Emma, it seemed like there was a call to action. I know we didn't really get the chance to look at it because we didn't view the full length of the video, but in those videos that you sent out to various governors, there was kind of a call to action next step, which was scan a QR code, I believe, to download kind of a policy playbook. How did you all land on that as sort of the next step that you wanted to bump governors into off of watching the video?
So Western Governors University has developed a policy playbook, which really helps support our legislative goals by showing legislators that we have done the work and the research behind what we promote at Western Governors University, which is diverse paths to higher education. So we really wanted them to come down the funnel a little bit more from introduce to educate. So we wanted them to learn more about our institution. We wanted to support these one-to-one relationships that we already had with them or we were in the process of forming with them so that they had a little bit more idea of how we engage legislatively and some of our goals in the long term.
That's really helpful. Thanks. And I think that kind of framework of thinking, how do we bump legislators into the next action rather than just having video be sort of a one-off piece that is a visual of something that's ongoing? How do we actually prompt them into the next place? Emma, you mentioned the word storytelling a couple of times. And I think that's such a kind of a buzzword in video work, a buzzword in advocacy. Max, I know that your firm seems to really place a real emphasis on storytelling. That's kind of coming through in everything that you've talked about thus far. Can you expound on that just a little bit more about why storytelling is such a critical component of kind of effective video work?
Yeah, I think to be very frank, people are sick of marketing messages, right? Like they can see a tagline, they can and they know that it's not really connecting with what they're trying to do or what they're trying to achieve. People can smell that BS, right? They can smell it from a mile away, and they know when they're being sold, and I think that's part of the reason why so few people trust marketing messages. I also believe that story is incredibly powerful because people don't remember facts and figures. Here's a fun one that you probably won't retain because it's a fact, is less than 10% of information given as like facts and figures will be retained, versus 60 to 70% of information will be retained if you tell it in the form of a story. And so this is because of a thing called narrative transportation. Narrative transportation is really like where you try to take somebody and have them feel what the person on camera is feeling. And so we do that with interviews and with B-roll. So that way, for example, a mom in South Carolina sees a mom in Nebraska and they're like, oh, they have to like get their kids ready to go to school before I go to class. That is narrative transportation. So she automatically trusts that person on screen just a little bit more because she can empathize with them. I think one of the really cool things about the work that we get to do is we really focus on documentary style storytelling through video. And really viewers can often identify with those characters in a story because they experience the empathy and understanding towards the character's situation and emotions. That type of narrative transportation is so incredibly powerful and drives far more action than just saying, 60% of your constituents believe that adult learners deserve grant and aid money.
Yeah, it makes sense. A lot of you all who are out there watching right now probably know this inherently from, Hill days where you're pulling people in to give testimonials or speak to legislators directly about an issue that's important to you all. And so the next piece of transference is figuring out how to work that into a video that's accessible, digestible, that has kind of that punch to it. We covered kind of the success story of WGU's campaign. Well done again, Emma. I'm just curious from your perspective, Max, why that campaign was particularly successful in the way that Emma kind of outlined the results that they got.
I think the first big one is personalization. And I know that is not super scalable to be able to personalize them in the way that WGU did this. But I do think that was one of the reasons that this was such a powerful campaign. Two, WGU's commitment to quality. We went in and we filmed with them for an entire day. Which means that we were filming with the president of the university for an entire day, as well as the VP of External Affairs. Those are two really high-level folks that have a lot of other things going on, but they made this a commitment because they wanted to share with those governors who WGU was and like how we could help them, get to their heroic ending. And then I think the other one that I mean, I guess I kind of talked about this, but just that high level buy-in. President Pulsifer has an inherent trust in the work that this external affairs team is doing. And so when we ask him for a commitment and an investment of his time to be able to speak to these governors one-on-one through video, he made time for it. And I think that's incredibly important and incredibly impactful.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Max. Now I'm just curious. I know, and some of this is coming in the Q&A, so I may be jumping the gun slightly on this. When a lot of organizations think about video, they tend to think about user-generated content, right? But here we're talking about something that's been put together by a professional, design firm, a professional storytelling firm. So I'd love to ask both of you, maybe Emma first and then Max, kind of what the advantage of working with a professional outfit was, as opposed to kind of DIYing it or putting it in the hands of advocates, or just saying, to whomever, record on your phone, we'll put it together. What was the real impetus for going with kind of a professional brand organization? So Emma, why don't you lead us off, and then Max would love to hear that from your perspective as well.
Sure. Well, first, I think organic storytelling through social media channels can be extremely powerful. We've seen that at WGU through some TikToks that went absolutely viral, drove tremendous enrollment in some of our programs. So that can be very impactful. But when it comes to legislative work, I think that creating something that's really tailored to the audience is essential. And so Max and his team are able to do that. We're able to work together to create things that are specific for this audience and things that are really relevant for them. I think that working together, we have both a legislative expertise and then a storytelling expertise, which has really been very powerful for us. Max and his team are really able to take us outside of the organizational bubble. We're able to get outside of this legislative mindset or maybe a WGU mindset and really tell a story that's going to be compelling for people who are maybe not hearing the stories every day, make the content a lot more engaging and connect the dots in ways that we might take for granted.
That's helpful. And Max, I realize I'm asking you essentially to sell your studio to us here, but to you, what is the advantage of working with a professional outfit as opposed to kind of just doing it yourself with the people inside of an organization?
Well, I appreciate the idea of getting to sell ourselves, but I'll actually take it a little bit of a step beyond that, because I love the work that we do. I love the work that a lot of folks are doing. But I think there is a really special emphasis on a professional storyteller. Working with professional storytellers, working with journalists, it works in a very similar way. They understand the psychology behind what drives action, and taking your story and applying their knowledge and creating that end product is incredibly powerful. So I think, one, in the same way that policymakers and policy professionals have their subject area expertise and they understand what drives action in those different things like Hill Day, professional storytellers, especially the ones that cross that with video, have the ability to take that seemingly I'm going to say maybe sometimes boring story, add an element of drama, add a little bit of impactful music underneath it, and then bring it down to a really powerful couple of minutes. I think some of the other really simple ones is it's this idea of the halo effect, right? The halo effect basically says your product has a perceived value, and the higher the quality of the marketing materials that you're seeing, the higher perceived value of that of that service. And so we really played into the halo effect specifically with this one, as we wanted those governors to know that this wasn't just President Pulsifer on a phone saying, hey, congratulations, governor. But we wanted to show them like, hey, we made an investment in this project. And so that halo effect, I think, also comes into play.
That's really helpful too, to think about. I think to that point, we always sort of see an emphasis on developing video content with the idea of let's get short snippets of video, small pieces that can be shared out on social media. Kind of on the counterpoint, I was just curious, do you feel like there's a value in longer form work or videos that go on for more than 30 seconds? And have you seen any applications of that kind of video content that you developed?
Yes, unequivocally, yes. Like I would say we specialize in that 2 to 4 minute type of video. Mostly because for the educate and the remind phases of that engagement funnel, once folks understand who you are and they're a little bit invested in you, they're more likely to want to get just a little bit deeper with you. I use the analogy of a first date. I don't know if you guys have ever been on a first date where you're like, I have happy hour, but I have something right at 7, right? Where you're like creating that time block because you're protecting your time. In the same way, somebody might be protecting their time in that introduction phase, right? And so they may say, I only have time for 30 seconds because I'm not going to waste my time with like a 2 or 3 minute video. But once you get past that introduction phase and to educate, engage, and remind, they're already bought in. They want to consume your content. So that ability to give them that slightly longer form is more like date 2 or 3, right? Where there's dinner, drinks, and something afterwards. I do think the longer form content allows for like deeper, more impactful connections, but also gives you time to like share a little bit more information about whatever topic you're talking about.
That's helpful. I think you were going for dessert there was probably the next,
exactly,
most natural segue. Okay, well, helpful differentiating, ways that kind of shorter form content can be utilized, ways that longer form content can provide sort of a unique style of video. Last question that I have for you, and then we'll kind of throw it open to Q&A or chat through a few other questions that people are submitting. What do you feel like are the most effective advocacy sort of applications for video? I know that a lot of organizations that I work with through Quorum work with the idea of having individual advocates record testimonials, maybe around a particular issue or particular bill. What are some other kind of video delivery methods that you've seen that have proven effective?
Well, this is top of mind right now because Emma and I are right in the middle of booking probably 3 or 4 of these. So the first one is what I would call like a documentary style video. These are those slightly longer form videos, but doing it in a documentary form really empowers you to like connect with one person. And we can't give away too much about the videos that are going to be coming out, but I think one of the really neat things is being able to kind of follow somebody in their day-to-day life. And in our case, we want to show how WGU is meeting adult learners where they are. Right. So we want to be able to show that you can go have a life, you can go to work, but then you can still continue your education. Unlike most traditional like undergrad or master's programs where you actually have to take time off in order to do that. So with the ones that we're working on right now in these documentary style films, we're actually following people throughout their day. So that way the legislators can see like, this is a different style of education, but it's still a style of education that works. And so that documentary would probably be the first one. I am the son of educators, and my parents have both reminded me that the quickest way to show somebody that you love them is by teaching them something new. So I would say like educational videos would be the second kind of big category. And as we talk about this, we think about creating videos to educate an audience on an issue at hand, whether that be an issue in a specific community, and then what are some of the solutions that are proposed in there, by kind of giving a couple of steps on like, hey, this is the issue at hand, and here are 2 or 3 ways to fix it, or here's how we can help you fix it. I think that's incredibly powerful, because I don't think that some of our legislators and even some of our policy influencers necessarily see the issues every day, especially for those that we're working with at WGU, which are those adult learners who have lives outside of the education space as well. And this one, I'm going to steal this one a little bit from Emma Solomon. And you may hear me referencing her as Solomon. It's because we have like 4 Emmas that work between our 2 teams. And so everybody is just referred to as their last name. So if you hear me referring to her as Solomon, that's why. But she brought up this idea of like storytelling based narratives. And from our perspective, we really think that creating compelling narratives about real people affected by real issues, and really like showcasing their success stories can not only like humanize the cause, but it evokes an emotional response. And as we evoke that emotional response, our goal is to drive people to action, right? We want those policymakers to influence policy. We want those policymakers to actually be changing policy in our favor. So
that's helpful, Max. Thanks. I'm going to steal the quote from your parents about showing love through educating the next time my 3-year-old tells me that she can put her pants on by herself and shoves me away. But yeah, that's really helpful. One thing that I'm really curious about, Emma, I know just from reading your bio and talking to you briefly, you're relatively new to this role with WGU, correct? And so I'm just curious whether from being a lobbyist and doing other work in public affairs, you kind of came into this role as digital advocacy director, deciding we want to make an impact with video, or was that something that has evolved since you took on the role and you're sort of realizing, oh, I want to keep going down this route because it's really proving dividends for us?
Yeah, great question. I think that it's just been a really nice confluence of events that happened. Max and his team really specialize in video production, as he said, in these longer form videos. I have experience in bringing constituents in to meet with legislators, and I know how powerful that moment can be when they're hearing from someone who has had that lived experience. And so I think that video is the most powerful and engaging way you can really kind of recreate that magic without having to find the right person, have them take time off work, and then bring them into their legislator's office. I think the more you can do to find the common points of connection between the legislator and whoever's in the video, doesn't necessarily, obviously you can't find a constituent every time, but making it as relevant as you possibly can for them, whether that's about a rural issue or, if they're having a nursing shortage in their district, we're going to try to highlight a nurse in our storytelling video. So that's how that came together and what we're trying to capture through video.
That's great. Thank you.
Zeke, can I brag about Emma Solomon for a minute?
Please do.
Okay, so I feel like she has that like Midwest groundedness of like, I'm not going to brag about myself. But one of the things that is true is Emma Solomon was a brilliant lobbyist, and she was a brilliant government relations director. And what is so fun is having somebody that is like just excellent at their craft say, I want to add on a level. And that's where this idea of digital advocacy has really come into play. And so this is an entirely new position, and already she has an incredible team underneath her to execute on this, because I think at WGU, and Emma, if I'm speaking too much, you can tell me to shut up. But like at WGU, we believe that this digital advocacy approach is the future of how government relations works. We know that there's always going to be room and a need for those people and the handshakes and those conversations and making those connections and those relationships. But if we can like fast forward some of those introductory conversations, doing a little bit of education about the organization or what we're trying to accomplish, I think incredible things can happen. And I think Emma Solomon is just very, very eloquent and excellent in her field. And I know her team was bummed to see her leave the government relations team, but also so excited. And I think organization-wide at WGU, they know that like digital advocacy is going to do nothing but grow and thrive under her leadership. So just wanted to get in a little brag, because she's not going to do it about herself.
That is so kind, Max. I just think it's great to work at an organization that's putting a lot of emphasis behind something that's so creative and cutting edge. I don't know a lot of obviously I have a lot of friends in this space. Not a lot of organizations are putting a lot of emphasis behind digital advocacy in the way that WGU is. And I think it's really an exciting time to be working in this sphere and just playing with all the tools that are now available to us. I think a lot of this obviously was really amped up during the COVID era, and we were trying to be thoughtful about how can we interact with our legislative friends and how can we grab their attention and stay top of mind without overburdening them. So it's been really fun.
Well, that's great. Yeah, and I think Max's framing of the use of video as an introduction rather than a substitute. I think sometimes organizations that we work with think of video as a catch-all that they can put some things into, but really it's a piece that leads to deeper engagement, right? Emma, kind of what you were talking about there at the end, I think segues us really nicely into our Q&A. I've been sort of looking at questions that people have been dropping in the chat, so going to get to some or most of those. And I think the first question for a lot of people, even when we were showing that example of the portfolio piece that you sent out to different governors, is cost and buy-in, right? So WGU gets all the gold stars for their sort of willingness to push forward digital advocacy. But with some other organizations that people may be watching, who are working for, they may be a little bit more hesitant, and particularly around the idea of cost versus achieving a particular objective, right? So I know each of you can speak to this in certain ways, but I'm wondering, Emma, if we can get an answer from you first, like what would you recommend to a peer who may be in the advocacy space or in the public affairs space, and they're saying, I'm trying to figure out how to get my VP or my president or my CEO to, okay these dollars towards video production when we want to achieve X, Y, or Z. Like, what tips might you give them to say, use this framework or, use these examples? How would you go about that?
I think to start with, I would tell them that audience is everything. And I think that if you're working at an organization that has a marketing component at all, they're going to agree with you on that one. And they are not going to understand the audience the way that you do. And so if you're working with a professional agency to develop these materials, it's going to be so much more impactful than if you're creating materials for, a consumer who's not a legislator. And then I think my other piece of advice would be to start, I would focus on pieces that can be evergreen, that you can use for years to come. So that way you're getting the best bang for your buck over time, and hopefully you see results and then can come back and create more content.
That's helpful. Max, what's your perspective on that? Just in terms of like, weighing up cost versus client objectives. I'm also curious for a studio like you all, are you presenting different options to organizations where it's, if you want to spend this, we can accomplish this. If you want to go all in with this, we can do X, Y, or Z. Yeah, how is that a part of the calculus for you?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think I feel like any organization who's not investing in video in 2023 is super behind. And I'm not just saying that because like it helps our business, but it's really becoming a standard, right? In the same way that a website was not a standard in 1995 or 1996, but by the, year 2000, 2001, 2002, like you had to have a website. In the same way, your audiences really need to understand who you are and what you do. And the quickest way for them to consume that is through video. And so I think as you talk about the costs, there are lots of low cost options to jump into this. There are dozens of online video editors, dozens of organizations in every city across the country that can be doing some of this work for you. As you start to get into the more premium services, like you're probably starting at 15, 20, 25K to get into a documentary style impact piece that's in that 2 to 3 minute range. I think one of the most important things is to make sure that you're telling the whole story of what comes with that video. Right. And so as we talk about that idea of taking one video and using it 10 different ways, it's really, really important to make sure that whoever you're working with also understands that that's really important to you. And so as you're talking about that investment, like it's expensive. It can be expensive. It usually is expensive. But if you're getting it out in front of the folks that you need to get it out in front of, the dividends are incredible as well.
Right. And even thinking about the rate of return versus putting ads out there that you're not really sure how they're being absorbed or things like that. You usually have metrics on it, or you're putting it in front of a very specific audience, personalized in the way that you are, which I think is a really unique and great idea. We also had somebody kind of asking, what do you think is the next frontier in video engagement? And somebody wrote interactive video, ? Max, I'll kind of leave this one to you. I don't know if you're sort of testing the boundaries of what is possible with, nonprofits, organizations, brands. But what are people kind of clamoring for, or what are you finding is really engaging people in new and different ways?
Yeah, interactive video is a super fun and fascinating foray that folks are going into. Vimeo has some incredible tools right now, which is a really low cost way to get into those. The challenge with interactive and just like any of these formats is really what is your why behind it? If you think about it, I think we could talk about what is next for video, but I do think it's really important to kind of back up. If you think of Simon Sinek's Golden Circle, you have the why in the middle, you have the how it gets done, and the what it is. So many people focus on the what instead of the why. Especially if you're an organization that is newer to video, just getting in that repetition of creating video content, refining it to make sure that, as Solomon mentioned earlier, it's connecting with audiences in the way that it should. That's a great start before you start playing with all the tools. I think a lot of people have been asking about AI, and is AI video going to take over the work of folks like us? I think we're a really long ways away from that at the moment, and we're playing with all of the AI tools, and it's helped our workflows in lots of different ways. But the idea that there's not a human behind behind it to make sure that it actually has the emotional tug that you're looking for. And, you're identifying that empathy and authority as you're making those sales statements and things like that. I don't think that that's going to go away anytime soon. I think as we talk about that interactive video, if you can nail down your call to action in a traditional video, then that is a great time to start playing with things like interactive video. So.
Those are helpful distinctions. Thanks. We also had another question from kind of an anonymous submitter. Emma, this could be a good question for you, but particularly curious how you all collaborate on this. Somebody was asking, how do you go about finding those quote unquote actual stories? Is there a special way you go about it? And would love to hear from both of you kind of on the collaborative process there, because I imagine there could be a scenario where there's a pull from the digital advocacy director, but this person isn't quite as comfortable on camera. And so maybe Tellwell wants to use a different type of story or a different person. So what does collaboration look like for you two on that front?
Well, I'll start with the last part first. So Tellwell, as Max said earlier, they do a great job of just making anyone feel comfortable on camera. Max often says that it's his job to make you look good, and they do that very well. So that honestly has not been an issue yet, as far as like a story that Tellwell says, no, there's nothing here. They can find the story. As far as how we begin the story finding process at WGU, first we identify what connecting points do we want to have with this legislator. Again, audience is everything. So you want to be conscious of that. And then the beauty of working in this space is that it's human nature to be drawn to stories. So many people that you come across are going to have a great story for you. And so honestly, it's just been a matter of finding the right one that's going to fit this specific purpose. And we honestly use our comms team to help find them, marketing, our alumni teams. We really lean on our partners within the university to help us uncover these little gems. Max, do you have anything to add to that?
I always have something to add, right? But I think the finding stories, and I think this is where Madeline's question comes from, or I guess this was the anonymous one, is finding people and their stories is really difficult. And it's something that actually I think has to be that person-to-person connection. And so we oftentimes will engage with like sales teams in organizations to start to ask them, who are your favorite clients? Why are they your favorite clients? Have you had any clients that like you had a really crappy initial experience with, but then like they turn around and now they become one of your favorites? Those types of like leading questions can really start to peel back the onion, because I think if you just ask like a marketing team, like go find us a story, that's so difficult to do. It really has to be those customer success folks like you, Zeke, that have heard those stories of like overcoming obstacles, because that's part of the hero's journey, right? You have to overcome an obstacle to get to your heroic ending. And oftentimes those customer success folks are the people who get to hear those on the front line. And so making sure that they have an easy path to be feeding those stories into marketing, or in our case, feeding those stories into advocacy, is so helpful. In our case too, we use our regional teams that are the boots on the ground. So regional vice presidents and regional comms folks, because as a national university, it is really difficult to try to find each individual one because we're so spread out. And so using those boots on the ground has been incredibly impactful for us.
That's great. Thanks. Two more questions. We'll see if we can get through them briefly. Just curious to hear from you all. Somebody was asking, in a world of so many issues, problems, and drama, clearly it should be appropriate, but where does humor fit in the impact and engagement aspect? And if you use it in your products, what types of products are appropriate? So just curious, especially when you're trying to get legislators' attention, staffers' attention, is humor ever an appropriate avenue kind of utilize to do that?
Yes. I mean, short answer is yes. Now, is it slapstick humor? Is it like, you know, stand-up comedy? Absolutely not. But moments of levity work into a storyline, because if everything is like, we have a terrible problem and there's no way to fix it and nobody is going to come and help you unless you do it yourself, right? Like if you have that type of, you're not going to draw an audience in. And so it's incredibly important to have some moments of levity, and some moments of just like human interaction. And we find that oftentimes that is happening with pets. Pets are a great way to throw in just a little bit of humor that like brings a little bit of a smile to your face, without it being over the top. One example is we just finished up filming out in Montana, and this incredible teacher, she has horses. And she has one horse that's kind of a jerk. And that horse kept trying to like get on screen or get on camera. And so we had her mic'd up and she's like, yeah, that one loves the limelight. And so just those little moments of levity, I think, are incredibly powerful.
That's helpful. Emma, last question here for you as we wind our session down. Seth was in the chat asking, clearly you can make a larger creative impact via digital marketing. Are there more effective ways to track results, quote unquote, objectively now, or do you still encounter the age-old issues trying to highlight and capture impact for reporting purposes? So was just curious, some of that goes back to the questions that we've been asking of budget versus demonstrated impact, getting buy-in from higher ups. So was just curious for this campaign, how you measured impact of the videos that you all distributed.
Sure. For this specific campaign, there's nothing like click-through rates. Obviously, we were measuring who is scanning those QR codes for engagement, but I think in that it's like the legislative work in general, and that it's a long game. This campaign was designed to introduce and educate for a lot of these governors. And I think that you are going to run into these age-old issues, but the more you can kind of use tools like Quorum to really measure who's viewing, how many click-through rates are you getting, the better you can make your case.
Thank you for the plug for Quorum. We'll always just say that we do help map, track, record all of your efforts, and we're experimenting with advocacy-related video. So if any of you in the chat are interested in that, reach out to your customer success manager, and we'll pass that along to our product team. It's just a matter of figuring out how we get those videos into legislators' hands from your advocates to allow you to tell your story. I just want to thank our two presenters, Max and Emma. This has given us a lot to think about, a really engaged audience. Thank you all for all the questions that you wrote in. Also saw somebody else from WGU saying that Max and Emma are a very formidable duo. So you have the full support of your organization, which is great to hear. And really look forward to hearing about all these legislators receiving individualized video pieces from all the organizations that are in the chat listening in. So you've really started a trend here, I think. Emma and Max, thank you both so much for your contributions to this session. For those watching, we're coming up on the end of our time. Thank you for joining us. Just to reiterate, this session has been recorded. We will distribute the materials, including links to Max and Emma's excellent videos, although you can't get one of the physical pieces yourselves, sorry. And in the next hour or so, or in the next few minutes, actually, we will be starting our next set of sessions, one of which is going to be strategies for engaging the executive branch with Bob Carey. And after that, there will be applying data-driven insights to public affairs strategy. So please do stick around for those sessions in just a minute. Use the next minute or so to visit the loo, grab yourself a cup of tea, whatever is necessary. Thank you again, Max and Emma, for your help this afternoon.
Thanks, Zeke. Bye.
Thanks, Zeke.